Today on the Intimacy Inquiry, I'm joined by the wonderful Dr. Joli Hamilton, a research psychologist, certified sex educator, and relationship coach specializing in consensual non-monogamy and jealousy. Dr. Joli Hamilton is a relationship coach for couples of color outside the lines and founder of the Year of Opening. She's a depth psychologist, a TEDx speaker, a best-selling author, and ASEC certified sex educator. Where she's got time to do all this, goodness knows. Joli co-hosts the Playing with Fire podcast, which I can highly recommend, and has been featured in the New York Times, CNN, Vogue, Cosmo, NPR, and any other magazine you can think of. She spent the last 20 years studying and reimagining what love can be like if we open our imaginations to possibility. Joli helps people create non-monogamous partnerships that are custom-built for their authentic selves. No more shrinking, pretending, or hiding required. Wow, you've taken on quite a task there. The first thing I want to, well, first of all, you're very welcome. And then the first thing I want to ask really is, what were you like in your formative years? Were you always a very sensual, sexual, inquisitive person? Is it something that came later in life? Yeah, what were you like in your sort of teens?
So I would say that I was very sexually inquisitive, but mostly because I consider myself to be a person who woke up early. Like there was some sexual trauma in my life that, it happens. And I was processing it in my teens. And as I was processing it, it became very apparent that I was also open to a lot of things. So I felt very in touch with my sensuality and sexuality. But that said, it wasn't like, it's not the simplest thing to understand. What does that even mean? I mean, this is pre-internet days.
Yeah. Yes, kids those days do exist, when there was a library and a book on the shelf and that was it. And the pre-internet days, yeah.
Right. But I was exposed to pornography really early in my life, which, it was mostly print. And so that definitely had an impact, right? It had a body image impact. It had an impact because this was, of course, pornography made specifically for the heterosexual male gaze, because that's primarily what was out there. But there was also some heavy kink pornography that I saw. So I had these, what I think of is I had inklings. I had these inklings of like, oh, there's something there. But then I followed a pretty standard issue. Like I knew I was bisexual, but I picked a boy. I got engaged at 17, married at 20, and I picked a very, very straightforward, boring path that didn't allow me to explore nearly as much as I wanted to.
Wow, you literally were vanilla in person, if not in mind and soul.
In person.
But it's hard.
Yeah,
if you see a kink or see something a bit unusual, untribal. What do you do with that? You feel awkward just going up to somebody randomly and say, "Hey, I've been looking at this sort of BDSM stuff. Do you want to what?" And it's what do you do with it? Where do you go? How do you explore it? What do you actually do with the desire you have? So I guess just following the tradition and going into marriage is the natural thing to do.
So, and I went into a marriage, and I'm a talker, so I would talk to him about what I was interested in.
Okay.
And he was not a talker. So, the words just would sort of come out and then just sort of sit there. Like, okay. He wasn't against the things that I was turned on by, but he wasn't really inclined to make them happen with me. And I didn't understand the wide world of non-monogamy and what was possible beyond my relationship. So the upside of that for me was I had a very rich imaginal world. So I allowed my kinky side, my queer side to flourish in my imagination. And then when I was 32, I wound up leaving that marriage and found out how to engage in that in my actual physical embodied life.
Was it like the popping of a champagne cork? You came out of this 32 years and thought, right, here we go. And you got to try all the things you've been thinking about for the last decade or so.
Not really, because I had a lot of children. So, so for me, it wasn't that like, it was more like, oh, the next partner that I found was someone who was really open to trying things, but also very shy. Again, like somebody who didn't necessarily have language for what they were interested in. So it was a slow burn. And also I had to find the spaces. Like I live in a pretty, like right on the edge between suburban and rural. And so like I had to figure out, where does this even happen? Like where do you go? What are the opportunities? But by this point, I had access to the internet, which also changes everything, right? You can start to realize, oh, I'm not alone. This isn't even unusual. And this is when I started gaining like much more formal training. I had been doing sex education from the perspective of postpartum doula work,
Yeah.
helping couples figure out what to do with their sexuality after a baby's born. And then I transitioned into, oh, what about all the rest of sexuality? What about all the stuff beyond vanilla?
Mhm.
And what about designing your relationships? And that took up the lion's share of my 30s.
So I think I've read that when you came out of the marriage, you didn't wait too long, and I think, was it 45 days later you were in a non-monogamous relationship? Was that what you? Let me step back a bit. What did you understand a non-monogamous relationship was before you got into one?
Not enough. Not enough, Andrew. So I had heard about non-monogamy just a little bit before, just a few months before.
Okay.
Some of my friends had confided that they were expressing their sexuality like in the wider friend circle we had. And I was listening to that and hearing stories about it, but I really didn't understand exactly what it meant. There was drama, there was struggle, there was also excitement, but I wasn't participating in it. And then when I fell for I all of a sudden had this big crush blow up in my life. And so my shift from monogamy to non-monogamy was almost instantaneous, because when I finally took in the concept, when I realized like, oh, monogamy is one choice among many. Great. It felt so true. It felt so authentic. It felt real. It felt like, yeah, this is exactly what I've been looking for. I didn't even know. I thought that was just a thing that happened in TV dramas. I didn't know it sounded very soap opera. But when I made the shift, the one thing I did know is it felt authentically in alignment with my values. But I still didn't understand, but what are the mechanics?
Yeah.
What do we actually do? Because we're still operating in a monogamous paradigm. And so nothing prepared me for that. Even though the people I partnered with, I jumped into a triad right away, and they'd been open for their their 20-year relationship. But again, not with tons of conversation and a deep understanding of like, we actually do this well. A lot of stumbling around and we just do. We don't really worry about what it is. And that's a hard go. That makes for a rough entry point.
Yeah. Because I can, correct me, but I guess non-monogamy doesn't necessarily mean incredibly kinky. So somebody could be non-monogamous and just want regular sex, but with more than one person.
Absolutely.
Okay, fine.
Yep,
Good.
absolutely. And my clients now, I find while there is a large overlap in kinky and non-monogamous, there are many clients who I have who they're like, no, I am vanilla. And some of them are specifically looking for non-monogamy because they want to build family with a larger family system. Or some of them are looking specifically to not have to engage in the kinky world, but in their local area, maybe it feels like that's the only place where people are thinking beyond the box, right? It can be a little tricky because, and really, when we get right down to it, kinky there's not like a clear line. The difference between vanilla and kinky is an entirely subjective experience.
Yeah.
So that adds more nuance to it, because not everyone considers themselves kinky. And sometimes you ask them what their practices are and you're like, oh, okay, you don't consider that kinky, so I might, right? So we really have to get into the weeds about this stuff.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? 'Cause, I mean, there's obviously dictionary definitions, but I'm sure what I think is kinky, you might just think, boring. But it's really interesting. And so the one thing I've always thought about kink, and I guess BDSM in particular, and I've talked to people in the community and dominatrix and other people in that sort of space, that the one thing they do, which I think vanilla couples or whoever could really learn from, is their sort of communication skills. So I know in the BDSM community, a lot of the pleasure in a way is almost negotiating what's going to happen. So what are we going to do? What are we going to try? What's a complete no? What's a maybe? And what's an absolute yes? And we don't do that typically in the straight world.
Right.
And I was saying to somebody, there was somebody for 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. the chances are what you enjoyed on day one, week one, are probably different than what you enjoyed 20 years later. And there's probably things that you've maybe wanted to try for the last, who knows, 6 months, 6 years, but never sort of dared say it. And that, whereas I think in the geek community, in other communities, there seems to be a much more openness to at least having the dialogue or holding a safe space to have the dialogue. And I think, straight people aren't, and sort of standard vanilla aren't necessarily very good at holding that space without any immediate response.
Well, we're not taught. We're not given an education on how to relate to each other, and our sex education, at least in the U.S., I don't even really consider that we have sex education. It's in a terrible state of disarray. But even if we do, that often is talking about mechanics. It's talking about the basics, and then what happens when we actually get out and have our relationships. We tend to repeat the models that we saw, even if we desperately don't want to. It's just the nature of being human that we repeat what we've seen. So for a lot of people, even just talking feels antithetical to what they describe to me as hot sex. Hot sex should be spontaneous, not talked about. Or I want a relationship where I'm just known and my partner like just knows how to meet me. Like, that's not actually how it works. But we've been sold this line through rom-coms, through porn, where we just jump right into the action and it's all happening, right? It's a bummer that people think it's like unsexy to do the talking, when the talking can be the thing that actually builds intimacy and builds the juiciness. Like, we build towards something. And non-monogamy done well, same as kink. Like, we have to develop these communication skills. So
definitely, because I know you do a lot of work looking at jealousy and envy as something distinct and different, and what jealousy is and how that operates, because it's I think it's human nature to have jealousy at some point in a relationship, and that might be because of the current relationship, because of previous experiences, lots of different things. But I know that jealousy can be reframed in the context of non-monogamy. So how do you understand jealousy to operate? Do you ever feel jealous?
I do. So I study jealousy professionally, and people often ask me like, "Oh, so have you like solved it? Have you fixed it?" No, no. It's an emotion. That would be like saying, "Have you solved anger or have you solved sadness?" No, I'm not even trying to. That seems like a fool's errand to me, because jealousy, it has great wisdom, right? Jealousy is, there's the threat detection system of like, hey, this valued relationship could be interrupted. But also jealousy is alerting me to some sense of a lack of inner security, lack of understanding between myself and my partners, possibly also just the fact that this relationship feels very electric. It might feel like it's on the edge all the time. Sometimes we're in more jealous situations because we're inviting that in. And everybody's different. Like, I experience jealousy at this point as something that I find arousing. I like bringing it into my life, but that's because I've been able to create a life around me where I have a lot of resources. I feel well-resourced. I have a lot of clearly negotiated, well-articulated clarity in my relationships. So it's safe to play with jealousy, to play with that emotion, just like it might be safe to play with anger in a heated scene, right? Because you know that you've really laid out a strong framework. Most people are hoping to dissipate jealousy in part because they're still frightened of the abyss. Jealousy can feel like once I fall into it, everything is involved. My body, my mind, my soul, and I feel like I'm dying. It is a very serious experience, emotional experience.
Yeah, no, nobody wants that. But I think, like you said, using it as part of the turn-on process, because I almost have a thought that if we have no jealousy at all about a personal situation, I'm not sure how passionate we are about that personal situation. It almost feels that jealousy almost comes as a given, otherwise it becomes very sort of stale and static and doesn't really evolve, I don't think. So when you went through your marriage, you came out of it at 32, got into non-monogamous relationship, started to explore the world more broadly, discovered the internet. How did you make the progress from being part of the community to completely engaging with and being educated in and talking about and guiding people in the relationships that are non-monogamous?
Well, I have a habit, a history of really whatever topic I am currently engaged in, diving all the way headlong into it. So, my entry into non-monogamy was very, very messy. It was incredibly challenging. There was a deep lack of resources. I mean, there were a few online forums if you understood how to use, old V-Bulletin forums back in the day. There was a magazine that was, aimed at one specific type of non-monogamy, and then you could find swingers communities, but it was rough. So I didn't have any guides. I didn't have any mentorship, and that meant I made some really fundamental mistakes that cost me dearly. I think it changed the trajectory of my children's lives because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was out there just whacking a path through the jungle with a machete, having no idea what I'm doing. So my way of dealing with that was to go back to school. I was like, well, I got to figure this out. So I went back, I got a bachelor's in psychology. Then I did a master's and a PhD in depth psychology, Jungian psychology, specializing in jealousy, archetypal jealousy as my point of research. And then I went back and did another master's in mental health counseling because what I was finding is not only was there a lack of information, but even amongst therapists. I engaged so many therapists and coaches over the years trying to help us. And many of them did more harm than good because they themselves were steeped in monogamy. Even the ones who were practicing non-monogamy themselves and who were saying, I'm non-monogamous friendly, like they were also struggling because we're swimming in this monogamous miasma. And so just because something works for one person doesn't mean it's transferable to another. So I took a very research-oriented approach to this. I dove into the research on what makes a healthy relationship and started recognizing that when you get really good at consensual, negotiated, conscious non-monogamy, the skills that you learn there, they all can apply to being monoamorous. You can go apply those in a one-to-one dyadic situation. The same is not true in reverse. If I learn all the things that I might learn in an MFT, a marriage and family therapy program, or if I go to a therapist who specializes in monogamous couplehood, the skills not all going to transfer to non-monogamy. Yeah. And so it was really important to me that we start differentiating these skills and understanding which ones work well for non-monogamy and start creating more resources for people, because it took me 8 years to feel like I was doing non-monogamy in a healthy way. I'm 16 years in now. 8 years to get to the spot where I was like, yeah, okay, I think I've got a handle on this. And best of all, I know what tools to turn to when things aren't going well, because they're not always going to go well. That's just too long. 8 years is too long. It's so long.
Yes, it is. I mean, if you can go to somebody, if people can talk to you and have that shortened massively, then think of how great the last 15 years would have been instead of the last 8 years. It's
exactly. And how much less damage to the long term of so many relationships, including friendships and things. Yeah. Like it's ideal to me. It's been awesome to learn by getting, like, I really like learn by getting dirty. I believe in that. Like, I like a good mess. I really do. But along the way, there were irreparable harms that happened too. And that's one of the things I focus on is, can we get clear on what we need and want so that ideally, we're gonna get some bumps and bruises along the way, but not do irreparable damage.
Are there still lots of misconceptions about what consensual non-monogamy is? Do people think it's threesomes? Do people think it's just about sex? Do people think everybody lives together in the same house? What do you get when people find out what you do, and they sort of, obviously people are very keen to share their views on things? What are the misconceptions that you still hear?
Yeah, the biggest one is that it's all about sex. I think that's the knee-jerk reaction, that it's all about sex, and that it's always cis men that are looking to start non-monogamy. And actually, in my client base, nope, that is not what I see. Midlife women are a big source of and not always the instigation. Sometimes they don't know that that's what they want, but as they are invited into exploring it, they are often the ones that are like, yeah, this actually works really well for me. and of course, some people, when they hear about non-monogamy, they instantly are they're pulled in by the fact that these people might talk about sex. So I don't even know that they really care how many people are in your bed, or people will always ask me, like, what are the sleeping arrangements here or there? I'm like, we can talk about that, but
Yeah.
realistically, that's going to be different for everyone anyways. I think people get excited at the idea that someone's going to be transparent in talking about sex, romance, intimacy, how we make complicated relational strategies work over the long term.
Yeah.
That's what gets people's attention.
Which, I do think it's very true that as a society, extraordinarily, we're still very reluctant to talk about sex and money. We don't talk about. So, and I think, which is hard then for my kids and my kids' friends and my friends and everybody else. We just don't talk about sex. Essentially, you just want to talk about all the time. It's not, but I'd much rather my children and their friends hear about relationships, intimacy, etc. beyond, and our education system is similar. So I think our kids learnt about practice safe sex, don't get an STI, and I think they might have had a lesson on consent, which is just a start, I guess. But then that was it. There was no, I think anytime any school here thinks about talking about maybe a mild kink or something different or a different option, the newspapers are, oh my goodness, and the straight away the parents are organising a petition, and they have no idea what it's about. They really don't. Right. But they said, no, why are you normalising this behaviour? Why are you telling our kids all these things? Why are you persuading them to be this thing? No, it's not that. It's like information about anything. Information about a war, information about famine. People aren't going to go to war and start starving people. It's better to be informed accurately than people go through their lives thinking, oh, I'm really different, I'm just not happy in this situation. No, that can't be right because we were told at school that isn't a good thing to do. It just feels that the whole communication thing is a bit of a gap. And is that one of the things that clients and people come to you hoping for, is how to communicate the needs that they have? So I can't get in my head that two people sort of sit down one day and I thought about non-monogamy. What do you think? Yeah, I thought about it as well. You should try it. It doesn't feel that happens. So
yeah, every once in a while.
How do we have this dialogue?
Yeah, every once in a while I have some clients who show up and they're like, yeah, we were away for the weekend. We'd had a drink or two, and it, like one of us said it and the other was like, yeah, sometimes two people really do have that conversation, and yay for them. And that still doesn't mean we know. The big problem then is we don't know what we don't know. And each person then has a vision of what does it mean to open a relationship. And the conversations that need to happen from there. We often talk about learning how to have hard conversations, but I think it's actually a whole bunch of skills. Yeah, we need to learn how to broach hard conversations and how to stay steady in them, but we also need to learn how to handle the inevitable ruptures, the disruptions that are going to happen as we start to realize, oh, my partner has truly different needs and wants than I do. What does that mean? We spend so much time in monogamous imagination trying to match each other, trying to be a complete overlap, trying to align everything. Opening yourself up to non-monogamy instantly opens up the imagination to, oh, what if there are lots of people in my life who I overlap to some degree, and that makes it very obvious, oh, we're not identical. It bursts the couple bubble, that imagination of we are one. And now we have to deal with, okay, how do I communicate with someone who is truly other? Yeah. And ideally, we would be doing that in our monogamous relationships, right? The other is truly other. It's not about who you're having sex with, how many people you're having sex with, or how your emotional intimacy goes. It is genuinely about, how do I treat the other as a distinct individual and recognize those differences and hold steady in the face of that. And that's the skills and the practice of differentiation. And that, for most of my clients, they find, oh, there's the hard stuff. It's not actually the communication, as in it's not just the words. It's how do I hold steady in the face of recognizing our differentiation. Yeah.
One of the things I've so often thought is that, so within a monogamous relationship, in theory, it's two people are together and they do whatever they do with each other, and that's it. Nobody else is part of that relationship. So it's sort of, there's only because there's only sort of one version of monogamy. But with non-monogamy, it feels there's many different versions. Like you were saying, the couple had a few drinks on holiday. They invited a woman into their bed, and that was fabulous. And so that's non-monogamy. But so are they only happy having the man sleeping with another woman? Is the guy happy with a woman sleeping with another man? Is it always together? Is it always separate? Is it pairs with pairs? So how do you get people to almost decide on the shade of non-monogamy they're looking for?
Yeah. I actually, when I work with people, I insist that they commit to working on this over the long term.
Yeah.
I don't work with people for short term. And this is why. On average, I see people needing 3 to 5 years to change their paradigm, right? To shift from monogamy being the way that their brain works to, okay, open, consensual, conscientious, non-monogamy being the way that your brain works. And so I work people through a year-long process. And about halfway through that year, I start asking people, so what is the shape? What is the structure that's feeling right for you? Because we spend the first half of a year starting to understand, what are your actual needs? How do you want to meet those needs? How do you deal with the fact that some of those needs can't be met? What do you want to do? And then what happens when we go out and explore? What happens if you try this shape? You try that. We do a lot of experimentation, and some of that experimentation is physical, embodied. A lot of it is, again, about imagining and talking with your partner about it and feeling your way through it. But I also always ask people, even when I start to say, like, yeah, so what do you think? More polyamory, more swinging, more, what are we looking at? Relationship anarchy. Don't get too attached to your label, because we don't know yet, right? And our labels are at best a way to help us communicate to another person what we're available for and what we're looking to build and create. But we still have to define that label. So we have to experiment to get there. But that also means some really careful, thoughtful experimentation, because when people just start jumping into the deep end of the pool and saying, well, let's just fuck around and find out. Well, the find out phase is not pretty. It's not fun. So I really recommend that people do some really thoughtful, paced process to move through this. And that can be frustrating. Often we have an initiating partner who's really excited and they want to move right to action, and a reluctant partner who's like, we have to find how do we compromise on the pacing in a way that feels actually appropriate to this particular situation. And that is also going to have a lot to do with what else is going on in your life. What else, what trauma history are you bringing in? What major problems are happening in your world right now? And also, the world's on fire. So everybody's nervous system may be a little bit less regulated than it was a couple years ago. And we have to take all of that into account. So in short, I ask people to slow down and be patient with the process, because they don't know what they don't know yet. And as you find out, we need to be able to actually continually adjust course.
Yeah. Do you find, I know it's hard to talk in generalisms, but also when you say people come to you, and typically one person will be a little bit further ahead than the other person, and then they sort of decide to try things, and then perhaps one person decides it's not for them.
Yep.
But the other person thinks it is for them. Is that pretty much the end of that monogamous relationship, and it can't really go forward?
So I can say unequivocally, no, that does not necessitate the end of the relationship. However, it is, I would say, more people in that moment when if I discover, you know what, I am really oriented to monogamy. I want to be with one person. I want to receive one person's attention. I want to give my attention to one person. Yeah, you might have gotten to a spot where this relationship is now incompatible with your joy, with your happiness. But I have actually so many clients who get in there and discover, oh, it's actually a little more nuanced than that. I do have, maybe they realize that they have monogamous attention. They don't want to split their attention amongst many people, but they're willing to be with the reality that their partner does have the attention. They find themselves in what we might call it mono-poly relationship, but there are lots of other terms we could use. Open monogamy is another relationship with structure where we can talk about maybe it's actually a more delicate scenario where we're figuring out, how does this work when one person is not just, yay, I'm totally in and I want exactly the same thing you do. But I just had a call with somebody and they were describing how over the last 18 months they've been exploring non-monogamy because their wife wanted it. Their wife fell in love with someone. It was like really into it. And his journey was through, okay, maybe I want non-monogamy. And then realizing, oh, I don't care about that. I'm not interested in it for myself. Into then meeting his metamor, connecting with his metamor, his partner's other partner, developing a friendship and realizing, oh, so for me, this isn't about sex, but this is about me relating to my wife as she is. She loves multiply. And so the growth in his psychological experience has been immense. But he had to be willing to stay with the difficulty. It's not like that came with many, many times when he thought, maybe this is just it. Maybe this can't move forward. So it's up to the individual. What's here for you? What are you learning? One of the things this person talked about is how it's forcing him to confront his entitlement. It's forcing him to confront his male privilege, the way that he has held his relationship in ways that he never expected to need to. And for him, that's been worth it, even though he's currently like, I'm not interested in more relationships for me. I'm interested in relating to my wife. So yeah, it's not a done deal if you're differently oriented, but it is harder work. I would say it is harder work. You're going to have to dig in.
Because if you were to have a man and a woman sort of sit in separate rooms and write down their fantasies, or you were to check their porn history if both of them use porn, the likelihood is they're not going to be exactly the same. Not from 1 to 10 anyway, but like somebody might.
No way.
And then there might be a bit of crossover, but in general, it's going to be unlikely if you've been with somebody for however long that even just as you met, that their thoughts or fantasies or whatever. And I think that's sometimes the thing that, and you're the expert, so again, correct me, but I think sometimes fantasies aren't necessarily the same as wanting to do something. So a common fantasy for women apparently is to be overpowered by a stranger. Somebody breaks into the house and has sex with them, whatever. But in reality, what they perhaps are looking for is their husband to sort of sneak in one day with a mask on and not say anything and ravish them or whatever. It's the fantasy versus the reality. So yes, fantasy allows us to fantasize about anything. It allows me to fantasize about being with 20 women or 20 men, or to be with this
or an octopus.
Doing anything, absolutely, doing anything at all. And that's the fantasy. But then there's obviously elements of that I think, well, actually, that might be quite interesting in real life, but not the whole fantasy itself. So that's the thing, I guess, is that yes, people have these fantasies and they can be quite extreme. People can watch extreme porn or read extreme porn, but it's not necessarily to say that that's what they want to do. It's just elements within those things. And I guess it's exactly the same within non-monogamous and monogamous couples. The fantasies still can be very extreme, and the reality can be something that's quite different. But yeah, we can role play a hell of a lot without having to actually.
Well, that's actually where I recommend people start. If you're questioning whether non-monogamy is for you, the imaginal realm is where I would have everyone start. Because first off, if your inspiration, your reason for wanting to open up is my sex life doesn't work right now. Okay, well, okay. I want you to get a therapist into the room and assess, do the two of you want to work on your sex life, or are you setting it aside permanently? Are you saying like, this is off the table? Because if you want to work on it and you think inviting another person in is going to address this, no, now you just have more sex to talk about. If you can't currently talk about your sex life, adding more complexity to that situation isn't going to make it better. However, if you can use the imagination of a third, the imaginal third is one of the great ways to explore what comes up. How does jealousy hit me? How does envy enter into this imagination? Do I get reactive? Do I feel great while we're having sex, but then spend the next 48 hours deep in a shame spiral? This was just talking about it. Okay. Now we have some indications about where we're going to have to spend energy before we're putting this into practice in the embodied realm. And people often want to skip this stage, or they think it's not real enough. But as a Jungian psychologist, I want to encourage everyone to take your imagination seriously. It's not just a playground. It is a playground, but it is also a place to do real psychological work. It is valid. It is incredibly helpful. I have seen clients go from completely not being able to do this, to imagine opening their relationship, to very carefully, incrementally using the imaginal realm to step toward negotiating for ways of being open. It does take time, but it's really, and it can be so pleasurable as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You talk about sort of the steps not to miss. So I always think, I know affairs are very different than consensual non-monogamy, but I sometimes think people that complain about them, friends that complain about their sex life with their wife, no, it's boring, she's always too tired or whatever, and then they start having this, oh my God, it's so exciting, we go to a hotel and it's wonderful, and we stay overnight, there's no kids next door to worry about, there's no washing to do, and it's like, well, but there you go. That's literally listen to yourself. Take your wife to the hotel and surprise her and do whatever. Yes, of course, the kids next
Vacation
door,
sex
washing to be done. Absolutely, there's shit in the sink. You haven't taken the bins out, whatever. Of course, it's going to be different, isn't it? But that's it's the sex that you have with a stranger in a hotel or somewhere you go away for the weekend. It's of course it's going to be more exciting.
Which
but
actually,
I can't do that with your partner. That's
Yeah, which is true, but also adds into the complexity of non-monogamy, because if you have a nesting partner, a life partner who you've built a life with, I have 7 kids. We, the person who I raised those children with and was doing that by my side, they didn't get vacation Joli nearly as often as the other people I was seeing, right? Like you're getting 2 entirely different realities. And even when you go to create vacation time, it's not the same thing. So there is a reality that we cannot have the same kind of connection with someone. I mean, for that matter, I have exes who I made children with an ex who now we both get to have more time to ourselves because we co-parent, which means the children are there, the children are here.
Yeah.
These experiences, they impact how everybody might consider what non-monogamy might be for them, but also they all offer constraints. Everybody's situation is going to be constrained in some way or another. And some of those constraints we imagine are because of who our partner is. Like it's my partner is boring, or they're tired, or they're not kinky enough, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we forget to look at the larger context. Is it just that life is hard right now? Your partner doesn't feel supported. They don't feel like you are doing the emotional labor that they need in order to create a context for sex. There's a million things. So all of that, none of that goes away when we do non-monogamy. We still have to attend to, are you showing up in every partnership that you have the way that you mean to? It can be tempting to sort of just have like, well, I just want to have this fun thing on the side. Yeah, a fun thing on the side does not negate all the effort that we need to put into every relationship, including the fun thing on the side, which will also need its own energy and attention.
It's completely true. I think the big challenge that I think we face generally is that we just poor at communicating. Yeah. I was talking to a really lovely lady a few weeks ago, a dominatrix in Poland. She's fabulous, and she's quite young, and she's very vivacious and lovely. And she was saying a lot of the men that come to her, then it's not necessarily about sex at all. It's about just giving control for a little while. It's about the erotic nature of giving up control. And they said that and when she talks to them, they talk afterwards or before, she says that their general comment is, oh, I can never ask my wife for this. Oh, God, she think I was weak, and she looks to me to be the man of the house. And it is that very strange anomaly. Maybe it's not strange that we feel much more comfortable talking to a stranger or somebody else than our partner, and that's hard, I guess, because we should be able, we should want to be able to talk to a partner about anything. But I think what we fear is, we don't necessarily fear telling the partner, we fear the reaction. So we've thought about something for this guy. I might have thought about, I really want to try being submissive. I want my wife to dominate me for I might be thinking about it for 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, and then one day we're out having a drink or we're sat in the garden, whatever. I really thought about it, and then obviously the partner is is 5 years behind you on that journey. You've been thinking about it and everything. It's in your head and it all makes complete sense and it doesn't diminish who you are or whatever, but your partner hears it, male to female, female to male. And then you get that reaction and you can't, it's hard to come back from a first reaction. If the first word's out of the partner, oh, that's perverted. Oh God, it's very hard to. So is it an idea in general almost to preface a conversation with, I would like to have a conversation with you about something. Would you be happy talking about it tomorrow? What I want to use just to listen, not react, just think about it. And how do we have those conversations in monogamous and non-monogamous relationships? Because I guess there's people in non-monogamous things that want to try things with their partners they haven't tried before, or want to expand the definition of non-monogamy for them. But you've got to talk about it at some stage.
You have to talk about it, and you're 100% right. I frequently see people, they'll tell themselves a story that they need to figure out everything about the topic and what they want. They need to figure it all out before they bring it to their partner. And I've seen people wait decades. And then it comes like a bucket of ice water on their partner. Like, who are you? I don't even understand. But a couple of things that it's heartbreaking. It is on both sides of that equation. Yeah. That's so uncomfortable. There's something we can put in place in any relationship. We can start at any point, which is to start a meta conversation about how do we talk about things? What are our ways of talking about things? Can we create a request-friendly environment? And if we're going to have a request-friendly environment, then we have to practice accepting no. Really accepting, like, oh, I've got a no. Okay, thank you for your no. We also have to talk about what's the timing of these conversations. They often happen when we are a little inebriated, a little altered. Like, I hear a lot of mushroom conversations. I hear a lot of alcohol-driven conversations.
They're never going to be good.
Right. So our partner isn't actually set up, but also we haven't actually fostered an environment where it's okay to expose ourselves, to be vulnerable. So that's work that many people have to step through with someone. They need a coach. They need a therapist. They need someone to remind them, like, hey, you know how you watched your parents never talk about anything? And even if they did, it was behind closed doors. That's not it. We got to do something different. You know, my kids have watched me talk about everything. And they know what I do for a living. And obviously age appropriately. I wasn't talking with them about things that weren't age appropriate, but exposing them to the reality that we as couples in our little bubbles need to talk about everything. And we need to continually be able to update each other on who we are. But we also, to do that, we have to have the conversations about the conversations. And often people will start that with, so I need to talk to you. And it sounds dire. It sounds like a cancer diagnosis. It sounds so horrible. I have actually a conversation that I recorded with my anchor partner that is designed, 17 minutes long. It's designed for you to send to a partner to say, hey, I don't know how to say what I need to say. Could you listen to this? I imagine it's going to come across as kind of a lot or a shock. I'm here. I want to be in a conversation with you. And what we're walking people through is this is an invitation to know your partner more. And a lot's been left out up till now. And that's really sad. And there's going to be grief to deal with around that, around all the stuff you thought you knew that isn't true, or the stuff that you didn't know. And the only way to move forward is to make space for being in the unknown together.
Yeah. It's very interesting before when you said that there's a lot of people think that this non-monogamy is a chance for sort of cis men to sort of shag around, really. But actually a lot of people that come to it are middle-aged women are sort of going to middle age. And I was thinking about that. I guess that coincides with the time when a lot of women and men and their partners, they're suddenly got an empty house. They had 2 kids, 7 kids, whatever, and they've suddenly left home. They've gone to college, they've gone to work, whatever, and suddenly they've been in this situation for 20, 25 years, 30 years, where the primary function has been to look after the kids, really. No matter how much you say, we'll keep space for you, and it's all about the partnership, pretty much we're trying to keep the kids safe and keep them from making terrible mistakes.
And provide
provide
a life for them.
And then suddenly that isn't taking up 12 hours a day. So I guess then you suddenly think, oh gosh. Okay, well, first of all, you look over and think, oh, you're here.
Who is that?
And then you think, oh gosh, maybe maybe this sort of time to change things, time to think about different things. And I guess that always feels to me like the time where, I know people for some reason still don't do this, it's almost a time where you go to talk to a therapist almost as a tune-up, a touch base. Okay, we've had this live, which is great, and now we know we've got another, hopefully, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
It's not the same as we just had. We just want to sort of, a bit like you do with your car. You take your car in for a tune-up or whatever, just to check it. You check your health, you get your heart checked, you get your pulse checked, your blood pressure checked or whatever. It feels like it's a really good milestone. And it's not because something's wrong. It's just, okay, we haven't actually had a conversation in 25 years, 30 years, 10 years about actually what will fulfill us individuals as a couple. How do we go about that? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So first adulthood. Our first adulthood in a Jungian framework would be I need to build my stature in the world. Mm-hmm. I need to be able to meet the world, meet the challenges it brings me. I need to be able to make a living. I need to be able to meet the ups and downs of life. And first adulthood for most people it's going to last until you're somewhere between, say, 37. 37 is usually the youngest I see women start to hit that. Mostly women come to me around between 37, 45. Men, often it lasts a little longer. Often they're a little like, they're hanging on to that first adulthood. So I often see them sometime between 45 and 55. And second adulthood is about your individuation. This word gets misused so frequently. Individuation isn't just about I'm different from you. That's differentiation. Individuation is who am I and what is my path? What is my genuine, why am I even here? And it is something that requires you to have had this life experience. We don't do depth psychological work in general in our 20s because we're busy building up a strong stance in the world, and we need that. And then at midlife, sometime there in the middle, we have to take down all the bricks that don't belong in that building and rebuild and forge a new path. We have to figure that out. A bunch of that will impact our partnerships. It just will. So some of this is individual work. Some of this is work between two people. And many, many people are coming to realize that the life that they wanted for their first adulthood isn't the same as the life they want for their second adulthood. And then the question comes, can we still do this together? Can we each forge a path ahead that is intertwined without being enmeshed? Is that possible for us? And I think it's not a coincidence that it happens often when the kids are at least in their teens, and often when they've totally flown the nest. My youngest will turn 18 this Friday. I feel it. I feel the energy having shifted, and I have been doing this work really intensely, basically during my kids' teenagehood. But now that everybody's actually shifting all the way, I feel another level of wow, this is for me to decide. How does this path go forward? And how does that inform what decisions I make about my sex life, about my relational life? What do I want to do? What do I want to try?
Yeah.
It's a reckoning. And I love that. It's messy too, though.
Yeah, a couple of things with that. So one, I think it's, I really like the notion that it's important to sort of know ourselves before we can expect others to know us. And I talked to a somatic healer or a tantric person a few months ago. And they were saying one of the things that when we're very young, in puberty, early teens, whatever, we suddenly have these feelings, not sure what to do with them. We think, okay, well, we masturbate. That's the sort of first thing we do. And because of the age we are, we obviously are living at home. We are terrified someone's going to come bursting through the door. So we do it very, very quick. We get ourselves off very quickly. And she said, look, she asked me, said, have you spent an hour exploring your own body? No. And I'm 55 to 6 now. No, I haven't. Yeah. And I think, well, yeah, I know what I like, but I've never sort of literally laid there or whatever for an hour and just, gosh, do I like
just pleasure map?
Do I like the inside of my wrist touch? Do I like my earlobes? Just literally that. And it's almost that from a kid. We sort of our hand is like, no, that's dirty. Don't do that. And almost put off those things, and then hopefully we get past that. But then I think, that sort of age thing. So I'm the poster child for this now. So I'm 55. So my kids in late teens, and my dad died 5 weeks ago. My mum died 18 months ago, and it's literally that conversation in my head. And it's not about what I want from my sex life, really. It's really about what do I want?
Yeah.
Who am I now?
Who are you? Exactly.
So
That's the individuation.
My mum and dad, that they had me, they looked after me. We saw each other lots and lots. They're not around anymore. And my kids won't be around for much longer in terms of living at home. And so what? Yeah. So, and it almost sounds.
You're gonna have to live for yourself.
Well, it almost sounds selfish in a way to say, well, who am I? Is it? And you think, well, really? So just get on with it. But yes, I'm literally in that place where I'm sort of trying to have that individual. Yeah. What are the things I like? Who am I? What do I want to do? And hopefully, I'm sure all of them will include my partner. It's not about the sex as such. It's just about the generally taking the time to figure out who you are. So I totally agree with that, as opposed to, because I was thinking my dad was sort of 80 when I think, gosh, if I carry on the way I am now, will I be happy if I die 80 having lived this life? Is there anything else that I want to do or want to experience or want to try or whatever? And I think there probably is. And that's, it is finding that space and realizing that it's not a selfish thing. You're trying to, because the better you know yourself, the better for other people, I think. Whether it be friends, family, lovers, partners, whoever. It can't be a bad thing to know yourself.
No,
Sorry,
that was
a very self-centered look at me thing. But it just what you were saying was just so on point to sort of where I am.
Well, if you do not expend the energy to know yourself, then what exactly is this thing you're getting on with? Right? Yeah. Like what is it? Are we just taking up space? Are we just being a cog in somebody else's imagination of what the world needs? To individuate is to bring unconscious material into your conscious awareness. It is about becoming more and more you by bringing that material forward. What else would we have a consciousness for but to bring that spark into the world? I don't see it as selfish at all. It's just the opposite. I can't share me with you if I don't know me. And so I'm actually withholding if I say, no, I'm just gonna not do. No, you just withheld everything from the world. And it does often take some time and energy, and that time can feel very pulled inward. I have to turn inside and actually not just reflect, but do exercises like pleasure mapping, do imaginal exercises, have deep conversations with my therapist, with my closest friends. I need to do all of those things. And during that time, I may feel like, all of my attention is on me. Is this self-centered? It's a phase. It's a piece of this journey. And you're going to do that iteratively throughout life. But at midlife, most people are going to go through at least one big phase that often lasts between 2 and 7 years, where we're turned inward in order to recognize who are we and what are we bringing to the world. And that's going to happen more than once. And then we have times of great output and generative nature, and we're really, really in the world. That's a bonus. The world is getting you then.
Yeah, because nobody wants to go through life as a sort of a non-player character, just somebody in the background that isn't.
Yeah, don't be an NPC.
Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't sort of add anything, and it can add the smallest thing. But if you know yourself, it's much easier to know what makes you happy, really. Otherwise, you don't know if what you're doing is actually causing happiness or not. It's just what you do, which isn't good. One of the things I saw on your recent podcast, which I haven't necessarily thought about, was the importance of talking about money and how money is handled within non-monogamous situations. And I didn't necessarily want to talk about that, but I was thinking, obviously, with my dad passing away and stuff, thinking what happens when one of the partners dies in a non-monogamous relationship? How does that get? Does everybody's families know about the situation? Can everybody turn up at the funeral, the wake? Who does the arrangements, the plans? It feels like it's almost more important to have a will and a sort of a pathway for entering into the next life than anything else.
Absolutely. In fact, one of our poly elders, Kathy Labriola, has written a book on
Okay.
poly elderhood and what happens. It is different. It makes sense. Of course,
Yeah.
it's different. I interviewed Kathy on episode 186 of Playing with Fire, and one of the things we're talking about is like, so how is polyamory different if you are in the second half of adulthood, and what happens? Like, how do you have a situation where multiple family members are going to want access to a person at on their deathbed or
Yeah.
while they're chronically ill? But also, Kathy pointed out something so important, just invaluable. Think about, there are also more people deeply embedded in community, right? Non-monogamy is also about community. So,
Yes.
as we shift into a later adulthood, my guess is that more and more people will start integrating their non-monogamy as we talk about this more, and people feel free to, instead of retiring from non-monogamy and saying, oh, I don't do that anymore because it was just about sex. Instead, they will age with their non-monogamous community around them. That's what I intend to do. And I see many of my clients shifting their plans and saying, oh, I thought we'd retire into this like sort of quietude of just the two of us, and then there'd just be the one of us, and that's just how it would go. And instead, no, it's actually it's a web. And now we're talking about, I never thought I'd live with anyone else, but it turns out maybe it would make sense for 5 of us to all live together. And also, as we mature and we have the capacity to understand that we love each other differently, like there is some deepening ability to realize all those things that felt like an emergency about like all the jealousy and the envy and all of that may also start to shift into a more mature reality of, we all care about each other in different ways. So how can we make that work? There's a lot of beautiful conversation to have around elderhood and non-monogamy.
What boring question? What is the legal status? So in the UK, we had civil partnerships. They're sort of been done away with. They're again for monogamy, marriages and things. But we go to hospital. It's like, are you a member of the family? No, I'm not. This is his wife. But yeah, if you have, is there a legal status? Can you have or apply or create a legal status?
So no, in short, no. But there are certain things that, like, we don't go for legal status all at once. This isn't my area of expertise, but there are people who work on this specifically because it's a big deal. And in fact, when we were making a case in the United States for gay marriage to be legalized, one of the counter arguments was, oh, what'll be next? Polyamorous marriages. So unfortunately,
okay.
well, maybe we would let all the
That'd be
people
so
who care
terrible,
about each other, right? But and now we have big fish to fry over here because we have a lot of problems this way. But there are a few places. I actually live in Massachusetts, and in my home state, we have one city, Somerville, Massachusetts, that offers legal protections for multiple adults living in one house, which isn't just about polyamory. It's also about multi-generational living. Right.
Yes.
This impacts people in a lot of ways. Like right now on Friday, I will go from having, just like having raised a family with 2 parents raising these children here to having 5 adults who are children, but they're adults, right? So now there's 7 adults under this roof again. We do need to think about how this isn't just a polyamorous issue when we're talking about legal protections, but then there are other issues like 3rd parent status, 4th parent status. What happens? I know a quad and a 5-person polycule who all had children together. We only allow 2 names to be on the birth certificate in most areas. We're seeing little bits. There are bits of hope. We've had 3 dads listed on a birth certificate in one area. We've had, we've had some areas where people are being able to get a 3rd person, but even so, just a 3rd person. We need a lot more advocacy around this because people, what's the bad thing about having more people caring about each other?
I know more people to bring love and support to somebody's life. Exactly. It almost feels, gosh, there's only one person that's less than a
right.
There's one person.
Putting all my eggs in that basket.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things we went through when we sort of had kids. It's like, oh my gosh, what happens if something happens to us? Who do we give them? Not who we give them to, but who takes over the sort of the childhood's future and stuff? I'm not sure my sister wants to do it. The other sister's in Australia. What do we do? And it's it almost feels. It's almost back to that sort of notion that it takes a village to raise a child, isn't it?
It
which
is. And many people,
it feels so natural when you say it, really, because we don't have that sense of community. And we are seeing, because of house prices and lots of other things, kids are living at home for much, much longer.
oh yeah.
Yes, they're
Yeah,
kids, but
absolutely.
they're 23, 24, 27. They go away, come back, go away, come back. And,
Yeah, an open
they're
nest is a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not being offered the same world I was being
No,
offered when
same.
I
Yeah.
came of age in the late 90s,
Mhm.
and certainly not the world my parents were offered in the
Yeah.
early 70s. And but on top of all of that, we have the reality that as we start to collectively take
Mhm.
seriously that we all do things differently, that
Yes.
that we are going to do things individually, we're going to be different. Making a world where it's okay to be different, right? Like
Yeah.
everything in queer theory that says disruption is good because it reminds us that we're different. All the ways of disruption, they benefit everyone. So sometimes when people will get frustrated with me, I wanted to raise my children in a multi-parent household, not just a two-parent household, a multi-parent household. I wanted that. And when I wound up my triad, when it broke up, and I wound up with two parents in the house, and my mother died the same year, and she lived next door, and I was all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
just one person to co-parent with. It's exhausting. It was
Yeah.
exhausting in comparison to having more people around. These are big questions, so much bigger than just who do I get to fuck Saturday?
Yeah, that's the easy part. Well, I've taken up a lot of your times, but thank you. I've got just one last quick question, if that's okay. And you obviously meet a lot of people. I'm sure sometimes when you meet people, they are not necessarily in a good place. They're feeling uncomfortable. I'm sure you've heard some things that a lot of people would turn their hair white or they would blanch out, and you hear that, and you have to assimilate it, have to feedback, do whatever. How do you look after your own mental and physical well-being? How do you make sure you can be there for your partners, your children, for your clients, for everybody else when you're hearing all this? How do you not carry it with you all day long?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, I take my work very seriously, but I also take my downtime very seriously. My downtime has to include a lot of work on my nervous system. So I do neurosomatic intelligence is my preferred way of working with my nervous system. I love doing that. It's like all these little bite-sized things that I can do to help me come back into my window of capacity. And then, if your therapist doesn't have a therapist, I worry about them. I have my own therapist.
Yeah.
And I also, my partner, like my anchor partner, who's my nesting partner, lives with me. Like he's involved in my work. So he also understands what I'm going through, which is a huge benefit. I think my personal way of carrying all of this load is lightened because Ken is so involved. He's, my co-host on the podcast, and he's so involved. He shows up to my group programs. He's there inside of them, which means we both have the perspective of, wow, you're carrying a lot right now. And he's able to also hold that and take seriously what it is. That's a blessing. I got lucky there.
So did he.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and just depth of answer, really. You really know your subject. Of course you bloody do. You studied it for forever and ever, but you've lived it, studied it, and you've worn the t-shirt, got the badge. But it's and I hope it feels that we are starting to see more and more conversations about this sort of thing, and people recognizing that people are individuals. And I think a lot of the thoughts, a lot of the laws, for goodness sake, that were created when the planet had a few million people. There were a couple of 100,000 people in the US. That was it. And now there's 300 million. Now we've got 8 billion people. You can't be telling me everybody's the same, everybody wants the same thing. It ain't going to work. 8 billion.
It doesn't
people,
make any sense.
Absolutely not. So even when you think about it, just from a statistics point of view, it doesn't possibly make sense. So I think, talking to somebody, talking to a therapist, talking to your partner, holding space, recognizing that you're different from who you were 10 years ago, but there's a hell of a lot of other people out there that feel the same as you do. So I doubt there's one person in the world that has something in their head that somebody else doesn't. It's just trying to pair them up. Best
part of the internet, finding out you're not alone.
It is. Yes, you can find anything and everything now. Whereas before, it's what did we do before the internet? I trying to explain to my kids about going to the library to get a book out, and they look at me like I've got two heads.
I still love my library, but there's nothing like the internet for feeling less lonely about the things that make me.
Perfect. Have a wonderful rest of the day. and
Thank
fabulous
you, Andrew.
weekend. It's been really good to talk to you.
It's been great to speak with you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.